Hello, beautiful humans. I am back. I'm back on YouTube and I'm back on my podcast because Instagram and Facebook, it's just not working out between us. I've been deleted about 3 times now, so I think this is going to be the safest space for me to be able to talk to you about BDSM and kink without the fear of being removed. And hopefully this means I can get a bit more personal with you all and have a bit more of a chat and discussion with you all, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So for those of you new and old, my name is Sarah Butcher. I am a BDSM coach and kink educator. I am also a proudly collared submissive, and my goal really is to help you consciously explore what BDSM means to you, because it ultimately is something different for everyone. We all have our own unique experiences, and my role is to guide you on that journey and those experiences to make sure that you are having the best possible time. And so I thought I'd kick off this series by talking to you a little bit about my own journey, both personal and professional, into BDSM and kink, and how the two intertwined. And hopefully that may resonate with some of you. Hopefully it will give you a bit of guidance, motivation, inspiration, or just a bit of reassurance for where you are on your journey right now. So let's dive right in. Okay, so maybe let's start by going way back then, way back to when sex first came into my life, I suppose. Now, sex for me in the beginning, I kind of always found it a bit boring. Like, I thought that there was always more to it. Obviously, on reflection, I know that that's because I wasn't focusing on my own pleasure. I was only really focusing on my partner's pleasure. And also because perhaps they just weren't the right people. I think being with the right person, knowing what you're into, that comes with time. And so ultimately we've all probably been through those first stages of experimenting and exploring sex. And we've likely all had some pretty shitty experiences, to say the least. So I always had a very big interest in sex and sexuality, and the way that it felt like it was such a taboo to talk about, yet I always felt like I was very open about sex. I was the friend that people came to talk to about sex, to talk to about those things that they didn't feel that they could tell anyone else. And I was really kind of curious about this and the way that society has told us that sex is bad, particularly for women. And as a literature student at the time when I was studying at university, I decided to make this my project. I really wanted to do further research into the representation of female sexuality within literature, both historical and current and present representations, which included pornography, movies. So as I started to look into this, I was sort of hearing a lot of feminist opinions around the fact that sex is for women a bad thing, it's all about the men's pleasure. And yeah, I mean, we won't make this a feminist rant or anything like that, but it kind of led me down a rabbit hole, and this is where I discovered BDSM and kink, because I was looking at, okay, what do these feminists think about sex, and what are they saying about pornography that is so bad? Because, and even today, people say that pornography is bad. I really don't agree with that. I mean, I think that porn can be great inspiration, but not education. I think that's the main difference that we need to be aware of, that you can watch porn to maybe understand your fantasies and get inspiration for things that you want to create or do in your own sex life. But we have to understand that it is fiction. We only see what's presented in front of us on screen. We don't see the behind the scenes. We don't see the preparation, the communication that goes into it. And of course, you know, we shouldn't be solely relying on pornography, because if we are, then that's a whole other issue. But I really don't think that it is such a bad thing. So all of this demonization of porn, I think ultimately we all have a choice. And if you want to include porn as part of a healthy sex life, then by all means, go ahead. So anyway, I digress. It led me down this rabbit hole of looking into BDSM and kink. Now, I had never really come across this before. I had never really known much about BDSM and kink, and I read a novel, which is a great novel, called The Story of O by Pauline Riage. It was originally a 1950s French novel, and I think it was banned for a period of time as well because of the content in it. But it's essentially about a female submissive's journey into slavery in... I won't go into the story too much. You can go and research it or read it yourselves, but I do highly recommend it, particularly if you're interested in dom-sub dynamics. For me, it kind of awakened my desire to be submissive. You know, I was reading it thinking, wow, this is really dark stuff, but why am I enjoying it? So for me, as this sort of started to awaken my understanding of what some of my sexual desires might be, I did feel a lot of shame or confusion, like I shouldn't be enjoying this, because again, that's what society tells us, that particularly for women, you can't be submissive because, you know, that's when we're then putting ourselves in that weaker position. I mean, little did I know that there was so much more to BDSM and kink than just females being submissive and men being dominant. And that obviously came throughout my own journey of discovery. So anyway, during this research, I wrote a lot about whether pornography and sexuality was liberating for women or whether it wasn't, and talked a lot about choice and free will and the fact that entering into a dom-sub dynamic or BDSM dynamics is ultimately a choice. Again, I think a key word here is that whatever you do within your sex life, as long as it is a choice, it's between consenting adults, then there really is nothing wrong with that. And just as I was writing my thesis at the time, the book 50 Shades of Grey had come out. So I was actually one of the first people to write academically about this piece of, can we call it literature? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm a bit harsh on the book and the movie, not just because of its representation of BDSM and kink, but because of the way that it was written as well. I mean, that story, again, it's fantasy, we have to remember that, and it certainly opened a lot of people up to the idea of kinky sex. There are a lot of misconceptions within that movie, there are a lot of things that are not factual, so we kind of have to, again, inspiration, not education. Not everything within the book and that movie are true about the world of BDSM and kink, but, you know, are some of the scenes sexy? Yeah, I suppose so. And for a lot of you they will be, and I'm not going to tell you that you can't enjoy that book or that movie, as long as you know that it is just fiction, and you will have your own interpretations and experiences of BDSM and kink that might look nothing like that movie or that book, or for any book for that matter. You know, let's not just hone in and target 50 Shades of Grey. It's any representation of anything ever in the world is never going to be 100% accurate to how you perceive it or see it. So, as always, take things with a pinch of salt. Take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt. I always say that in my workshops and any piece of content that I'm putting out there. My perspective is only one perspective. So some of the things I say may not resonate with you, and that's okay. And there may be another educator or someone else out there who speaks about it in a way that does resonate with you. So please feel free to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. That's the best part about gaining education, right? is that we can learn from lots of different sources and take what we need from each of them. We don't have to take one person's way as the only way. So yes, so my first experience or understanding of BDSM and kink was through my studying. I kind of stumbled across it, not really meaning to, and it really just opened up this whole new world for me. Everything kind of started clicking into place, like the reason why I wasn't really enjoying sex or that I found it boring. Actually, like a lot of things from childhood were starting to fit into place. The fact that, and it sounds very cliche, but the fact that I love to, you know, always play the victim in like kidnapping games and things like that. Like being submissive felt like it was such a fit, a true fit for me. And so, yeah, I was keen to start exploring this, but I really didn't know where the fuck to begin. As I'm sure many of you might be thinking the same thing. Like, how do you get into this world? How do you know who else is into it? And yeah, like, what the fuck? How do you navigate this? And in those early days of me starting to explore this, I was freaking myself out, to be honest. I was looking on the internet for information, which, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, there really wasn't that much information around on the internet. And if there was, it was dodgy. You know, you couldn't necessarily trust it. It felt very dark and dingy. FetLife was around, and you know, I still use FetLife myself, and I do recommend FetLife to people. But when you go to see FetLife for the first time, it feels a bit scary because there are a lot of people on there, people who may be not so genuine. And for a newbie coming into the world of kink, going on to FetLife can feel a bit like in your face. So those were my kind of first experiences of that, and yeah, I really wasn't sure where to begin. Do I tell people that I'm kinky? Do I not? But then if I go on dates with people, how do I start that conversation around kink? So yeah, I had lots of questions. And so I was just kind of normally dating at the time, and I remember that I went on a date with somebody, and the first time that we had sex, they actually put their hand around my throat and choked me, without asking me, without any kind of consent or communication involved. It just kind of happened. And I'll be honest, in those moments, I thought, fuck, this guy is going to kill me. Now, I actually enjoyed it. But looking back, I put myself into a really potentially vulnerable and scary position. I mean, I don't recommend that as your gateway into BDSM and kink, particularly with something like choking, which requires real skill and knowledge around how to do that safely. But the thing is, unfortunately, I feel like these encounters are so common and we're just not talking about it, and we're just kind of assuming that that's normal and that's okay. And it's really, really not. And to say that it's taken me over 10 years to really realise that is scary too. And that's kind of why I do what I do today, is educate people. And I feel like a broken record sometimes, banging on about communication, consent, you've got to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. But it's so fundamental and foundational to creating kinky experiences that are going to be pleasurable. Anything outside of that, yeah, you're playing a risky game. I would say, particularly as a single female, new to the scene, new to exploring these kind of things, it can be so tempting to just go along with what the other person is saying, particularly if they're dominant. And I think this is something that I encountered in my early days, was that I was very much in a state of sub-frenzy. So sub-frenzy is essentially where a new submissive has an overwhelming desire to experience submission. and so they will go and experience things even if that means putting their own safety at risk. I can only see now, looking back and reflecting on my experiences, that I was in sub-frenzy, because I mean, dating is hard as it is, right? Online dating is hard as it is, let alone being kinky and really wanting to come out of your shell and explore your desires, wanting to have great sex. It was frustrating because I could never find anyone whose desires really aligned with mine. Perhaps it could be because that communication wasn't there. I think that's one piece that was missing for a long time. And so what happens there is that leads to people potentially taking advantage of you, or you kind of putting yourself in a situation where you're only going to have a mediocre experience because you're not fully able to communicate what you want and what you need. That's kind of what my experience was like. I remember going on many Tinder dates many moons ago, and on a first date with one guy, he brought a whole bag of toys with him, like a big bag of rope and cable ties and all of this kind of stuff. And you'd think that would be a red flag to me. I mean, I would certainly say that that's a red flag now, that you don't assume that you're going to play with someone on the first date. You need to create that connection first of all, and know whether you can kind of trust that person before you start even considering having sex with them, let alone bringing a whole bunch of toys into the mix. But did I listen to that? No, I didn't. We ended up having some experiences and it wasn't good. I actually ended up getting really badly injured because I was tied up and I was not being spotted correctly by this person, so they were not keeping an eye on me while I was restrained. I ended up hitting my face on the bed frame and busting my lip, black eye. It was really bad. I don't want to blame that all on this person. While it was their responsibility in that moment, I also have a responsibility to myself to communicate my needs first. So sub-frenzy can do that. It kind of put you in positions where you're not looking out for yourself first of all, you're not trusting your gut instinct, instead you're going after these desires because you just want to take what you can get, basically. I definitely learned from that experience as well, and that's why I always tell people, I know it can be really tempting to rush into things because you just want to experience all of the things when you're new. You're like a kid in a candy store and you just want to go and try all of the things. But please, please, please take your time to talk about it first. It's so worth it, and it just means that you're going to have a better quality experience, and that's better to focus on quality over quantity in those moments. That's just one story, but I have many other stories and things and people that I encountered along the way that started to indicate to me, wouldn't it be great if there was better education out there for everyone? And I'm not talking about just the people that I met that needed the education. I needed the education myself. And so this really made me want to do something with this sort of gap in the market, I suppose. And also I wanted to make it really relatable for people, because everywhere that I went, I felt like I wasn't able to connect with the people within the community. Like I didn't feel like I fit in with them. Things like munches that I went to, it just didn't feel like my people. It didn't feel like my tribe. Yet I knew that kink was something that I was into. And I know that I don't typically look like the stereotypical kinky person either. And I was thinking, yeah, I bet that there's a lot of other people out there just like me who don't want to sit in a dark and dingy room wearing leather and latex with a bunch of people that they don't feel they connect with. I didn't feel that was helpful. And so this is where I wanted to try and bring my interest in psychology and the fact that I'm a therapist as well. I really wanted to do something around educating and coaching people to have some really great BDSM experiences and to let people know that they weren't alone and that they could absolutely enjoy a healthy, satisfying BDSM lifestyle without needing to fit themselves into one kinky box based on whatever was already out there on the internet. As my journey continued into my mid to late 20s, this is where I really started to think, okay, I would like a serious relationship, but I don't know if kink and a serious relationship is going to mix. Like, how am I going to find someone who is kinky and who also wants to have a committed relationship with me? The reason I felt like this is because, well, one, this is what people always told me, was that you know, that they don't mix, that actually most people within the kink community are also polyamorous, which I didn't feel like I identified to be poly at that time. I was looking for a committed monogamous relationship, but with someone who also wanted to explore dom-sub dynamics. I was told by many people that I was looking for a needle in a haystack, that this was going to be pretty much impossible. And actually, it's almost like I took on that belief and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Any relationship that I did have, it seemed that they always wanted to see other people as well. I got into another relationship where I was wanting something more serious and romantic, but they were just looking for it to be a dom-sub dynamic where they then had a different romantic relationship on the other side. It felt like that person was using BDSM and kink or their dominance as an excuse just to mess around, to play the field. It didn't feel like ethical non-monogamy at all. There was no proper communication or consent or respect around that subject area. So essentially, it just felt like I'd met another fake dom, which was really disappointing after a very long stream of fake doms. On reflection, I think that the one thing I realise now is that I was so adamant that I wanted to meet an experienced dominant, someone who knew all about BDSM already, someone who had had subs before, who'd had a lot of experience on the scene. Which was really limiting my pool of people that I wanted to speak to. And I was very dismissive of anyone who kind of slid into my DMs who didn't know much about BDSM. I also think that the couple of times that I did let people into my DMs who were curious and didn't know much about BDSM, that ended up badly as well, because they were kind of just using me to fulfill a fantasy or to experiment with BDSM as a one-off, and then never heard from them again. So don't get me wrong, it is really hard to differentiate who's being genuine and who's not. And I think my biggest mistake was not giving it enough time. Again, the sub frenzy was coming in. I was wanting to have these experiences, and that was my own choice at the time, and I wouldn't change it now because I've learned so much from it. But I think time is so important, and the understanding that you need to get to know someone on a human level and at least have some common interest with them outside of kink, even if you're not intending to have a serious romantic relationship with them, because this is someone who you're going to be opening up to, being vulnerable with, and that really can't happen properly or on an authentic level unless you can establish that connection. So I really limited my pool of people, and after such a long time of just having like trial and error, really bad experiences, I decided that I needed to cut out kink if I wanted to find the romantic relationship that I was looking for. So it almost became like very black and white for me, that I couldn't have one and the other. It had to be one or the other. So I decided to drop the kink for a bit and just focus on myself, to be honest. And I think that when I reflect on this now, the fact that I then found a partner who I'm very happy with now, wasn't anything to do with me dropping the kink. It was to do with focusing on myself and healing from everything else in my past as well. I actually did end up meeting someone where I wasn't focusing on kink being the main thing. I wasn't focusing on okay, do they have experience in kink? Are they an experienced dom? This, that, the other. I just wanted to get to know them on a human level, right? And actually, what happened there was magic, because by this point I was already starting to get into my BDSM coaching. So Sub in the City had already been established. It was more like a blog to begin with. And so when I met my current partner, I told him what I do and what my interests are. And that was that. We didn't then dive into anything right away. He was curious about it. It actually wasn't something that he had that much experience in, but was definitely curious. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be open to this and just see where it goes. And then, you know, here we are, 4 years later, engaged to be married and in a 24/7 dom-sub relationship. I mean, an earlier version of myself is smiling, so happy, but she would never believe that that could be possible, because I was told that that would not be possible. That story is just to let you know that if you are someone who is looking for a romantic committed relationship, but you also want to explore your kinky side, you don't have to have just one or the other. You can have both. You deserve both, and you will find it. So don't settle for anything less. And I think also the moral of the story here is that as soon as I started being more authentic and true to myself, and not in this state of sub frenzy where I was just going to take anything I could get, I knew my worth. And we were able to develop a dom-sub dynamic based on trust, communication, and mutual respect. They are the core foundations of BDSM. And I have to tell you that the relationship that I'm in now, it is the best dom-sub dynamic, the best experiences that I've had to date. Of course they are, because we have the communication. That is the main part. Did everyone just hear that cow mooing in the background? Sorry, I literally live in a nature reserve. So there's cows mooing, there's birds chirping, there's probably dogs barking. I apologise for that. That is kind of a very quick fire round as how I got to where I am today, and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. And actually, since being in this relationship, it's only built on my BDSM and kink experiences, both personally and professionally. Some of you have probably met my partner because he's always at my workshops, always at my events, and we're really excited to start doing some more stuff together very, very soon. So working together as a couple to help you as couples integrate your DS dynamic into your relationship in a way that feels authentic to you. So watch this space for that, because we really have learned so much together. While he didn't necessarily have much experience in BDSM when we first met, one of the things that made him a great dom from the very beginning was being open to have communication and to wanting to learn about my desires and his own desires in order for us to co-create a dynamic that works for us. So when you meet someone, if they don't have experience in BDSM and kink, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be bad, not at all. In fact, having that new curiosity and a blank slate can be really such a great thing in building a dynamic that works for you. A good dominant is essentially someone who will take the time to get to know you and take the time to communicate, because it's Dom-sub dynamics are not just copy and paste, so no dynamic will ever be the same. What you have with one person will never be the same with another. So each time you enter a new relationship, you have to go right back to basics and start from the beginning and start learning about each other again. So yeah, we hope to have some new stuff coming in the future to help you on your journey to deepen that Dom-sub dynamic. So what we've co-created today is working really well for us, and also I found there are kinks that perhaps I didn't think I would be into before that I'm into now, and that really just goes to show how safe I now feel in this relationship, and that actually it wasn't necessarily that I don't like those things, it's just that the people that I've interacted with before were not able to create such a safe space for me to really drop into that vulnerability and really surrender, which is what the submissive experience is all about. So that's really special and really, really important that you listen to your gut, trust your intuition, that when you don't feel safe to surrender, that's not necessarily anything to do with you or the fact that you don't like something. It could just be that the person and the environment is not quite right for you. And if you can't have that open communication and really tell the other person how you're feeling, then really ask yourself if that is the right person for you in that dynamic. And then of course, over the years, Sub in the City has really grown and evolved as well. So on a professional level, I am working with people one-to-one, I'm working with couples one-to-one for coaching, personalised and tailored coaching. I'm running workshops and also events, so social events to bring people together to have that conscious, connected conversation around kink, retreats, hopefully play parties in the future. But it just goes to show that when you are with the right partner, with that support and that open communication, then things really do just flourish. So if you're in the process of currently looking for a good partner, please don't settle. You will find the right person for you. I honestly believe it. That's over 12 years of Kink Journey. There's lots of other little bits that happened in between, but those are just some of the key things and the key messages that I wanted to share with you. If this has resonated at all, if any of that feels familiar to you, please drop me a comment or a DM or something, and I'm more than happy to chat to you. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next video.